If you see a Chinese electric bike on fire, you'd better run. If it happens to be parked next to other electric bikes, well, you're in for a spectacular scene. Why are Chinese electric motorcycles so apt to explode in such a spectacular manner? Well, it all comes down to an unregulated industry. I'm going to explain. You see, motorcycles in China are seen as a poor man's form of transport. In fact, motorcycles are banned in all of the large cities in China. And I'll explain to you why. Number one, snatch and grab robberies were a huge issue. There used to be gangs of bandits roaming around, ready to grab someone's purse or their phone or whatever, and they'd quite often drag people down the road doing so. This was a huge issue in China when I first got there. And this is something that the Chinese government decided, especially the local city governments and the local provincial governments decided to stamp out by banning motorcycles outright. But of course, there's another reason behind it. Motorcycles look poor. And when you're a local government in your city, you're trying to produce this image of a pristine, modern city, you don't want motorcycles in it because it just runs the place down. You've got these ramshackle bikes going here and there, dodging through traffic, doing all these crazy things. So of course, that's another reason why motorcycles were banned in the largest cities. So in order to replace motorcycles, you had all these factories producing cheap, low-end motorcycles and scooters. They had to somehow come up with a way to bring in revenue. Let's face it, there are certain things in this world that are timeless and will always hold their value, like a beautiful Swiss watch movement. But there are other things in life which just suck, like that whole graffiti writing system of the Palm OS. Never again will this ever be used in the history of man. It's done. No one cares about it anymore, and good riddance. The same can be said about the wallet you carry in your pocket. Don't carry around some old relic that just makes you look outdated.
This baby has done wonders for my social life.
Get something classy. Something that's timeless, something that'll last forever. Get yourself an Exter wallet. Right now there's a fantastic sale going on over at shop.exter.com/SerpentZA. Go check it out. You can get a fantastic discount. Up to 25% off and more when you use the code SerpentZA at checkout. Go check it out. Seriously, they've got brand new colors. In fact, my favorite new color is Astral. I think it looks fantastic. My wife loves it too. They've got a navy blue Parliament leather wallet, which also looks absolutely incredible. You're not going to want to miss out. Get yourself one of these fantastic wallets. Go to shop.exter.com/SerpentZA and don't forget to use the code SerpentZA. And now, back to the show. So they retrofitted all of their old scooters and made them into electric scooters. It's very simple to do. Throw a bunch of lead-acid batteries inside of them, put a hub motor on the rear, a little speed controller, and you're done. I know a lot about this, by the way, because I used to modify and ride and mess around with electronic scooters and e-scooters, whatever you want to call them, e-bikes, in China for the longest time. And that's because I couldn't ride a real motorcycle in the big cities. So my main form of transport was an e-bike of some form or the other, and I did all sorts of funny things with them and souped them up, and it was actually a lot of fun. Now, the thing is, those first generation e-bikes used lead-acid batteries. You know, that's the kind of battery that most cars have, that, you know, you start for your starter. And they're actually not too dangerous. They don't catch on fire spontaneously, really. I mean, if they would, you'd see a lot of that. So lead-acid batteries are fairly safe. But they're not safe for the environment, I'll tell you that much. The chemicals and the way they're produced, if not properly recycled, can be devastating. You don't want that stuff running off into a river or into your groundwater or your soil. But here's the thing. The e-bikes were then unregulated. You didn't need a license to ride them. They didn't need license plates because it was a new thing. And they got pumped out by the millions. And so people would buy them because they're fairly cheap and ride them around the cities, and it created the same issue. Massive amounts of traffic jams, chaos, this image of a poorer city because now you've got ramshackle e-bikes everywhere rather than motorcycles. So the Chinese government stepped in and started to confiscate e-bikes. So they'd confiscate all of these things, they'd set up roadblocks, they'd put them on the back of trucks. In fact, I had an e-bike confiscated from me at some point. And it was very random. There were no real notices about what you could and couldn't ride. Finally, they brought out some rules that you could only ride the smaller e-bikes, the little foldable type ones. And even those have been now banned in a lot of places. So anyway, what you ended up with were massive fields of electric bikes. Just huge, you know, the scale of which you've never seen. And they would just sit there to rot because, first of all, it's too expensive to recycle or scrap them. Nobody wants to take ownership of that. The local government certainly doesn't want to deal with it. The owner has no access because his bike has been taken from him by the government and you can't get them back. So you have these massive graveyards of these things rotting away into the soil, batteries and all. And occasionally they'd catch fire, and it's apocalyptic when they do. Absolutely horrendous and terrible for the environment. But the fires started when lithium-ion batteries started to become the mainstay. Because as we know, technology progresses. And we went from lead-acid batteries in these bikes to lithium-ion batteries. You know, the same type of battery you have in your phone or you have in any electronic device these days. It'll be some variant of a lithium-ion battery. So these, unfortunately, are far more volatile. If you don't have proper quality control, if those batteries aren't properly maintained and looked after, there's a chance that they could, well, explode, as we see in this footage over here. And these bikes are so poorly put together because it's just a mass copy of a copy of a copy. Factories everywhere springing up making these things. It's very easy. I know because I used to build my own ones because I could go and get a frame here, body parts there, this there, the motor here, there. You could just buy these things on Taobao. All the factories, they just buy all these random bits and pieces. The quality control is not there. Slap it together, you're ready to go. And these things vibrate and you've got the batteries shaking around because they're not properly mounted. And it's really just it's a recipe for disaster, okay? So these things catch fire. And it doesn't only happen in China. In fact, not that long ago, this year, 4 people died in New York because in New York, Chinatown, there was an e-bike shop that was repairing these Chinese electric vehicles and charging the batteries there. And guess what? One of these janky batteries caught fire and the whole shop went up and the apartments above caught fire too, and 4 people actually died. And if you look into it and if you actually start to do some investigation, you'll find out that across the country in the USA and elsewhere, there are many fires, casualties and deaths caused by electric scooters and other electronic gadgets that have got, lithium-ion batteries in that are of poor quality. So a little bit of a PSA, by the way, before we continue here is if you do happen to have some or other, I don't know if it's kind of like a Power Wheels type thing for your kid or a scooter, electric scooter or electric bike, anything of that nature, and you've maybe bought it for your kid, you've forgotten it, stuck it in the garage or something, please, please, go make sure that it's not plugged in and sitting on a charger all the time. If you can, store it outside, especially if it's not a proper name brand and has a name on it that you can't pronounce. I mean, I'm talking about hoverboards, anything that's got a sizable lithium-ion battery in it, please store it outside. Or make sure that it's in good shape and that it's, like I said, not charging. Because, you know, if it gets too hot in the garage, if something goes, you never know what could set this thing off, but they are a fire hazard and the stats are there to prove it. You can go look it up. I'm not trying to scare anyone or be a fearmonger or anything like that, but please don't take the risk. Just like I said, you can go read up on it. It is a risk. Anyway, I hope you can understand why these Chinese e-bikes, you keep seeing videos of them catching fire and why they are such a bad hazard. And it really boils down to the fact that it's a very unregulated industry and the abuse that these things suffer is quite horrendous in China. I've seen it firsthand, I've done it myself, and it's no surprise that these things catch fire, to be honest. Here's the thing though, I wanted to end this video with something very positive. You know, you watching my video about those fields of rotting EVs, remember that video I did? It got a great amount of views and it got featured in the press, and it actually forced some change in China because nobody had really shone a spotlight on it before. Now some of the local governments were actually questioned by big news outlets, and it created a fairly uncomfortable situation for the Chinese government where they actually had to address the problem and say, yeah, okay, we will try to clean up and move, or at least they put these false promises that they're going to move some of these cars and try to clean up some of these graveyards because they were sitting there to rot. And they would have continued to sit there to rot, batteries and all, into the ground. And the reason behind this is the majority of these big graveyards, these fields of cars that you see, are part of these failed car sharing startups that were subsidized by the Chinese government. Remember, the Chinese government is making a massive push to make it look as if they're the leader in green technology in the world. This is also another reason why e-bikes have been ramped up and pushed out and, gotten to the point where they are in China. And because of this, these cars were all registered. They were all paid for by the government. And so now the company has received the money for this car. They produced the car, they registered it, it's got a license plate. Now what are they going to do with it? They can't sell it. If they try to sell it or move it on, well, now they have to explain to the Chinese government why they're not giving the money back, right? They also have to explain to the Chinese government why the subsidy was a waste of money because it's just sitting in a field somewhere. So it's too difficult and too uncomfortable to deal with. And that's why none of these graveyards will go away. They're not sitting there waiting for some kind of an arbitration in court about who's going to take control of what asset. No, because they've already been bought and paid for by the Chinese government to these companies that just pumped them out and put them in a field when they could no longer really be viable. So they will just continue to sit there and rot. And they would have continued to just sit there and rot completely untouched if it wasn't for my video and the subsequent news coverage. So now there's a chance that some of them are going to be cleaned up. And I think that's fantastic that you have been a part of this change. So again, as I always say, the only way you can ever force any kind of change in China, or I should say enact any kind of change in China, is by making the Chinese government lose face. So I wanted to say thank you for watching my videos. Thank you very much for being a part of this change. We're actually doing something good. If you want to find out more about what's going on in China, and I'm talking about up-to-date, down-to-the-wire news, events, and everything else in between, come and join me for the China show on Friday. This is my live show that I do with my business partner, Laowa86, where we cover what's new in China, the soft power hour, the Wu Maos, the haters, everything else. It's fantastic. It's a lot of fun. It's comedic, serious, and everything in between. So I hope to catch you there on Friday. Anyway, until next time, unlike these hazardous exploding e-bikes, stay awesome.